Keir Starmer in panic as Trump and Vance rip him apart. Osal entirely, reaffirming his commitment to existing allies instead. The failure of Starmer's initiative led to open criticism within his own party. Labour MPs, once hesitant to challenge his leadership, began voicing. The special relationship between the US and UK has long been a cornerstone of international politics. However, recent events have put this alliance under strain, particularly in the wake of UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's foreign policy missteps. His proposed peace plan for Ukraine, intended to elevate Britain's global standing, instead became a source of ridicule. 99% of viewers watch without subscribing. If you enjoy our content, subscribe and turn on notifications. It helps us grow and keeps you updated. Thank you. Donald Trump and Vance were quick to criticize Starmer, with Trump's team mocking his diplomatic efforts, while Vance bluntly stated that the UK needed strong leadership, not someone out of their depth. Starmer's plan was dismissed by key global players, including Washington and Moscow, neither of whom took Britain's role seriously. European leaders remained skeptical, and Ukrainian officials saw his proposals as vague and ineffective. The backlash intensified when Trump outright dismissed Starmer's influence, while Vance called his efforts a desperate attempt to stay relevant. To make matters worse, reports surfaced that Trump's administration was considering tariffs on the UK, further exacerbating Starmer's diplomatic troubles. His attempts to regain control of the narrative through a major speech failed, as he was widely seen as offering only empty promises. Even traditionally pro-labor media struggled to defend him. The situation deteriorated when Ukrainian President Zelensky, the very leader Starmer sought to assist, ignored his prop concerns more openly. Names like Lisa Nandy and Yvette Cooper surfaced as potential alternatives, while Angela Rayner reportedly positioned herself for a leadership bid. Labor's standing in the polls took a hit, with voters reconsidering their support. The perception of Starmer as weak and ineffective spread rapidly, with viral clips and media coverage amplifying his missteps. Right-wing outlets branded him a failure, while even left-leaning commentators questioned his judgment. Despite warnings that his peace plan lacked support from key allies, Starmer pressed ahead, leading to a full-blown crisis. His refusal to acknowledge his failure only deepened the damage. Rather than recalibrating, he doubled down, insisting his approach was correct and blaming critics for misunderstanding his vision. However, the numbers told a different story. His approval ratings sank, internal dissent grew, and Westminster insiders began preparing for a potential leadership challenge. Starmer had positioned himself as a steady alternative to conservative instability. Yet his own leadership was now in turmoil. His fate was no longer in the hands of global leaders, but in the halls of Westminster, where ambitious labor figures watched and waited for the right moment to act. His leadership was at a breaking point. The only question remaining was how much longer he could hold on. As the crisis deepened, tensions within the Labour Party escalated. Key figures who had once stood firmly behind Starmer now distanced themselves, quietly engaging in behind-the-scenes discussions about the party's future. Some MPs expressed concerns that his continued leadership could jeopardize their chances in the next general election. Others outright called for new leadership, fearing that Starmer's failures had irreparably damaged Labour's credibility on the global stage. The Conservative Party wasted no time in exploiting the situation, portraying Starmer as weak and ineffective. Prime ministerial debates became increasingly contentious, with opposition leaders repeatedly challenging him on his foreign policy blunders. Meanwhile, social media platforms were flooded with satirical posts and viral videos mocking his attempts to assert British influence abroad. Adding to the pressure, economic concerns began to mount. The uncertainty surrounding trade relations with the US, fueled by Trump's tariff threats, created anxiety within the business sector. British companies that relied on American markets faced instability, prompting outcries from economic leaders demanding clarity on the government's plan moving forward. Starmer's inability to secure a favorable trade agreement further eroded public confidence in his leadership. Despite attempts to shift focus onto domestic policy achievements, Starmer struggled to regain his footing. His public appearances were met with increasing skepticism, and even party loyalists began questioning whether he had the ability to lead Labour to victory in the upcoming election. With each passing day, speculation about a potential leadership challenge grew stronger. Political analysts predicted that unless Starmer could deliver a decisive policy success, his position would become untenable. In Westminster, internal discussions turned to succession planning. Labor figures with leadership aspirations subtly positioned themselves, rallying support among MPs and party donors. The shadow cabinet became divided, with some members openly challenging Starmer's decisions, while others sought to mitigate the damage by urging him to reconsider his approach. Starmer's international credibility had been severely undermined. World leaders, once willing to engage with Britain as a significant player in global affairs, now viewed the UK with skepticism. His peace plan had not only failed, but had actively weakened Britain's influence. Even within Europe, traditional allies questioned whether Labour's foreign policy direction was viable in the long run. Facing mounting pressure, Starmer attempted one last effort to salvage his image. He announced a major policy address aimed at reaffirming Britain's role in global diplomacy. However, his speech failed to inspire confidence. Critics dismissed it as more empty rhetoric, and the media reaction was overwhelmingly negative. The Labour Party was now at a crossroads. Would they continue to back a leader whose credibility was in free fall, or would they take the risk of pushing for a change before the next general election? As whispers of internal coups and leadership challenges grew louder, Starmer's grip on power weakened. The only certainty was that his leadership was now on borrowed time, with party insiders preparing for what seemed like an inevitable downfall. The road ahead for Labour was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Starmer's vision for Britain's global influence had not only failed, but had actively diminished the country's standing on the world stage. Whether he could survive the coming political storm remained to be seen, but with growing discontent within his own ranks, his tenure as Prime Minister appeared increasingly fragile. As the days passed, further signs of unrest within Labour surfaced. More MPs publicly voiced their dissatisfaction, while anonymous sources leaked damaging information about internal party discord. Labour's annual conference became a battleground, with factions within the party arguing over the direction Labour should take moving forward. The growing divide was undeniable, and party unity seemed increasingly difficult to maintain. Meanwhile, the electorate was losing faith. Voters who had once seen Starmer as a strong alternative to conservative leadership began to shift their support elsewhere. Some moved towards the Liberal Democrats, while others reconsidered their stance on the Conservatives. With an election looming, Labour's hold on its previously secure voter base was slipping. Starmer's last-ditch efforts to control the situation came in the form of a major policy rollout aimed at reigniting public confidence. However, much like his foreign policy debacle, his new domestic proposals were met with skepticism. Critics pointed out inconsistencies and impracticalities in his plans, further eroding trust in his ability to lead effectively. The once unshakable belief that Starmer would be the next prime minister was now under serious question. His party faced an identity crisis, his leadership was under siege, and his public image was in tatters. Labour MPs faced a difficult decision: rally behind a leader whose approval ratings continued to fall, or take a bold step in a new direction. With each passing day, the possibility of a leadership challenge grew stronger. The political landscape was shifting rapidly, and Labour needed to act fast if they hoped to maintain their chances in the next election. The question now was not just about Starmer's leadership. It was about the very future of the Labour Party itself.